systems.
Other than arguing the fact that animals would obviously feel pain when they die and they come into like our food, what's another reason for us to change to a plant-based diet?
Do you need another reason other than that?
We're just arguing the morals here.
Yeah, the morals. Yeah. Hello and welcome to another video by Vegan FTA, and today we're going to be reacting to one of Earthling Ed's videos. Meat eaters try to convince Vegan that what he's doing is pointless. Let's see if what Earthling Ed is doing is pointless, like they apparently try and convince him.
All right, guys, nice to meet you. It's a pleasure to be able to speak with you both today, and I appreciate you taking the time to sit with me. As you know, I have a banner, and the banner says, "Why aren't you vegan yet?" So I guess we'll do it one at a time, maybe, but I'm interested to know why you guys aren't vegan yet.
Well, I think I speak for both of us.
Yeah.
Well, I don't really have a standpoint on it. I don't have a standpoint, and I hope you, pitch me an idea and just I don't know, I'm open to change and just give me your best idea. I don't know. It doesn't hurt to see a different perspective.
Well, so when you buy animal products, why do you buy them?
They taste good.
It tastes good for maybe sometimes nutrition.
Right. Protein. Can you get protein from plants?
You could, yeah.
Yes, but I tried looking into becoming a vegetarian once. But I found that a lot of some specific vitamins or nutrition you couldn't get off plants. I think I'm not too.
For it, yeah?
That's what I heard at least. I don't know. And when I was looking, it was B12. I meant so everyone says to get supplements or something like that to compensate for it, and I don't think that's I guess best fit for me personally. And also,
Why not?
What supplements?
Yeah. Why?
I don't know. You never know medicines side effects and I don't know.
It's just B12. Would you be more? Yeah, but I can tell you there are none. To be honest, with things like B12 and such, the supplements that you can get are perfectly healthy and they're actually good for you.
I'll take your word for that.
Take my word for it. And this is another thing, right? The important thing is just go home and have a look at yourself. You know, just go and do some research, see if you can get B12 in a plant-based diet. So we can get protein that we need on a plant-based diet. Let's say we can get B12 as well. When it comes to enjoyment, does that justify the harm that we cause to animals?
Enjoyment. I mean, there's a lot of things that we do out of joy that harms the environment.
Yeah.
Even just I don't know, constructing a building so I have a roof on top of my head.
Yeah.
That destroys the environment, obviously.
You're charging your cameras, you use electricity.
It's weird that they're putting literal lives of individuals in the same ballpark as general environment. It's interesting to see how they're viewing it.
Yeah.
And that electricity comes from, I don't know, maybe coal mines for now. But I mean, it's still the main source. We don't have a strong renewable energy source that can, we can't rely on that. So
that kind of, in effect, answers the question. We don't have a strong renewable energy source. If we did, and let's say we had two sockets and one was a strong renewable energy source and one wasn't, and we were choosing to plug into the one that wasn't.
Oh, why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But the thing with a plant-based diet is we have an option, right? So we can choose to eat meat, dairy and eggs, or we can choose not to. And so why wouldn't we choose not to then as well?
Give somebody a good reason to switch from consuming meat to a plant-based diet.
Because it reduces animal suffering and animal death.
But if that person switches, that doesn't the impact it has is not enough to actually make companies to think about stopping.
And what if everyone says that?
What if everyone? I think some people are not in a position.
But that's why there is no there's no actual massive relative change.
It's not yet.
There is change. You can look through a history book. There are civilizations don't look the same. There are practices that aren't practiced any longer.
I think.
What do you think that would be in our lifetime?
Hopefully. That's why I'm here.
No, but come on, that's hope. I'm talking logic.
Okay. I want to build on something you said. It's this idea of I'm just one person. How is that going to affect the global thing? I think we're able to make that decision because we speak from a privileged standpoint. There's a lot of people, especially in the eastern side of the world, that rely on substantial farming and I don't know. They can't. They're not in a position because mainly due to poverty to have this debate, right?
Absolutely. I mean, interestingly, a lot of countries where
that's probably why Earthling Ed is at this university, talking to these people who can make that change and not talking to other people who might be in a different position.
there is more poverty, eat more, are less reliant on meat, dairy, and eggs, and eat more plants because they're cheaper often. But that point aside, I can't argue against the fact that some people can't do it. But the point is, what about those of us who can do it? You know, we recognise there are some people that it may be challenging, it may not be financially viable. But for those of us who can do it, that's when it becomes that more important question for us to consider. And look, one person isn't going to change the world, but if everyone says that, nothing changes, you know? So how do we bring about change if it's not through individuals as well as systems?
Other than arguing the fact that animals would obviously feel pain when they die and they come into like our food, what's another reason for us to change to a plant-based diet?
Do you need another reason other than that? Like, that's a pretty compelling reason.
Why do you need another reason?
Exactly. Oh no.
Because, well, technically, like, these companies that like breed these animals, they're bred for consumption.
But someone could breed dogs for dogfighting. Does that make dogfighting moral?
That does happen.
Yeah. Is that
Yeah, it's not about whether or not it happens, it's about whether or not it's morally acceptable.
moral then?
No, it's unethical.
No.
So is it moral?
But dogs aren't considered staple diets. Cows are.
They are, to some people, considered staple parts of diets. They are considered eating animals for some people. Would it be moral for them to start dogfighting?
No, but if the argument is that these animals are bred for that reason, and that's why we should maybe allow it to continue.
Dogs are bred to be domesticated. Like,
For those of you who don't know, cows, chickens and pigs, these animals who are farmed, they are also domesticated. So to say, well, dogs are domesticated doesn't really make much sense because it isn't a differential property.
Or like crossbred, like between breeds to make them look cute, or like.
And I don't think that's good either.
Yeah, no,
but
it's
like,
bad.
it does happen.
Yeah.
And there is a demand for it, so it will continue to happen.
But there's a difference between that and it then being morally justified. It's not moral just because there's a demand and just because it does happen, right?
Yeah.
So how do we morally justify doing what we do to animals then? You know, for food, let's say.
Well, we don't.
No one really questions it, so it's fine.
Exactly, that's true.
Yeah.
But
As long as it's not questioned, it's absolutely fine.
I mean that it's fine though, right? Just because we don't question it.
I mean, a lot of developing countries rely on agriculture as their primary sector.
Isn't it interesting how it always goes back to people who are in positions that the person they're speaking to isn't in? It's really intriguing how it keeps going there.
It would be quite hard to.
economically,
I'm talking about an economic perspective. It would be quite hard to convince all those countries to be like, you know what, stop producing animals and
And
go.
that's obviously the majority.
In some areas of poverty, you may see higher crime rates, you may see increased chances of robbery, for example. And you may think, okay, well, these people who are robbing are incredibly poor, they are in situations where they can't afford to even eat themselves, so this is why they're robbing. So there's a greater understanding for why they may be doing this. It doesn't mean that robbing is okay, and it doesn't mean that robbing across the board should be morally acceptable.
Of a world, like there's what, like nearly 4 billion people living in like Asia and 1 billion in Africa, like I'm generalizing here obviously, but people who have this option mainly live in North America, Europe, and we're like proportionally a smaller part of the world.
Well, that's true, but also we are disproportionately the biggest contributors to most of the problems, whether they be environmental or whether they be the animal suffering.
We are the problem.
Yeah.
So if we change, then the problem would also subside dramatically.
Okay, so let's say you convince me, right?
Yeah.
I become vegan.
Yeah.
Would I really take the time to convince Carlo to be vegan? Like, I probably
Hopefully I
would.
can convince both of you at the same time.
Let's
We're
say you
special
do,
cases
right?
'cause we're sitting
But that's
down.
2 people out of 8 billion people on this planet.
Yeah, that's right. But that's almost like an appeal to futility. Look, change is slow, and obviously us three making the changes ourselves isn't going to affect everything in the world. But the problem is, if we have that defeatist mindset, then why try to do anything? Right? Why try to do anything positive? Because we're just one person. And if we don't do it, those of us who can don't do it, then nothing will ever change. And if nothing changes, well, we know that that's not good. That's more animal suffering. That's more environmental damage. So those of us who can should, because by us doing it, we can make it more accessible and available for more people, and because we disproportionately contribute more to the problem than those people in other parts of the world.
That's a pretty good point, but that's only if it's what we want to do, if it's our priority. Like, I highly doubt.
This is what it boils down to a lot of the time, it seems. Someone doesn't want to make that change. They want the comfort of what they think is the foods that they normally have, the lifestyle that they normally have. When really you can find non-animal intested, deodorant that will smell just as good as other deodorant. You can find an amazing vegan burger. It doesn't really come at very much of a cost at all, but people think It is this massive change, this massive cost that you'd have to just say no all of the time. So fundamentally, they just don't want to make that change.
That if you ask like all these people here, then they're going to be like, yeah, it's my priority to convert to a plant-based diet.
It doesn't have to be a priority.
No, exactly. It doesn't need to be a priority. Like, you do multiple things in your life that aren't priorities. You can multitask.
It just has to be enough of a consideration for you to do it.
I'd say it's also like quite time consuming. That's when I was I told you earlier I was trying to become vegetarian. I would have to, like, if I were to go down that route, I would have to plan my meals, cook my own meals, because I can't just go. Well, there are vegan options here and vegetarian options, but in terms of variety, yeah. Not really. It's
vegan options, right? You guys have like vegan burgers that taste exactly like meat.
I'd have to, I don't know, put in extra effort every day from already like my busy schedule. I think that's why
How would you have to take an extra effort every day?
the majority of people don't switch to veganism. It's because it's an extra step.
I think that's true. I think you're right. People want to be people want things that are convenient and easy. And I don't.
Yeah, and little do they know, it's still convenient and easy to be vegan. As was said, there's literally vegan options at that university, so it's very convenient to just put your hand on the vegan one, and then there you are, there's your food. What people don't realise is it's still a convenient thing.
Disagree that maybe at the beginning it requires a bit of extra effort, but then it becomes a new normal. And once you know where you can get food from, once you know how to cook delicious plant-based meals, once you've done that, it's the same as you are now. You just have to get to that point. And that takes a little bit of extra effort, but once you've done it in that sense.
Do you consider like the disadvantages of being vegan?
Many disadvantages.
Yeah.
The fact that other people aren't, and it's hard.
Okay, let's say like you get 1 billion people to be vegan, right? That means you need more farmland. That means more forest land has to be converted into farmland. So you take habitats from animals. So you're still like ruining.
That's not the case.
No. The fact that people think that this is the case when we seem to forget that these animals who are farmed also need feeding. We strip so much from animals that we just forget about even their basic functions. We're so disconnected from them that we're not even considering their basic needs.
Why not?
The biggest user of land globally is animal farming.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
But if we have to feed those animals food. The majority of animals are factory farmed, which means they're fed crops, so that's food that's grown. So if we swap to a plant-based diet, we can actually reduce the amount of farmland, even farmland that's used to grow plants, because we're no longer growing all these plants to feed to animals. And we kill 85 billion land animals every single year. So actually we can reduce the amount of land that we need by swapping to a plant-based food system. Yeah.
But don't you need more, like, I don't know, calorie-wise or something? I don't know the numbers here, but I would assume that we need more amount of greens and stuff like that to compensate for the caloric nutritious values of like meat products.
We wouldn't necessarily consider greens to be good calorically dense food sources. They're more like micronutrients and such. But when we talk about calorie dense foods, we're talking about grains and of course beans and legumes and things like that.
Same degree of protein from like a plant-based diet.
Yeah.
But you would have to eat more quantities of them.
It depends. But if you think about a cow or a pig, they consume more than we do. So overall, we're still reducing the amount of land that's been grown. So even like plant-based farming, we reduce the amount of land for plant farming specifically by eating plants. That might mean that more plant farming is given to humans, but overall plant farming reduces because we're not feeding all those animals. So yes, more plants will be grown for humans, but that's still an overall reduction compared to what we have now.
I'll go with what you said. I don't know the numbers, so I just have to agree with you.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It can be hard, but what I would love to do is give you some information so you can find those numbers out on your own, of course.
I have a question. What standpoint would you take to convince somebody from the developing world to stop like producing like animals and stuff and instead producing?
If that's their livelihood, how do you tell a farmer in India to stop growing pigs?
There's a larger demand for animals than there is for a plant-based diet.
Well, I mean, India is an interesting one. Vegetarians are still contributing to the problems I'm trying to stop, of course. But overall, it depends on their personal situation. I don't know. I can't speak to every person in every developing nation. But I'm not trying to convince them. I'm trying to convince you guys. And that's the point.
Well,
so why don't you guys make the change now? Why don't you try it? Let's say I give you the information. You go home. Okay, yes, I can get protein. Yes, I can get B12. Yes, it is better for a land use perspective than animal farming. Then what? Do you guys try it then?
Well, food's kind of indifferent to me. So if you put like a platter of vegan food in front of me or meat, I have either one.
even less of an excuse not to go vegan then.
Really can.
So why not opt for the plant-based one then in your day-to-day life?
Because I'm more accustomed to the meat one.
More accustomed to it, but that
He literally said, I'm pretty sure, that you can eat burgers that literally just taste like meat, which is absolutely true. So that flavor profile that you're accustomed to, you can still actually have.
that doesn't mean that you can't choose the plant-based one.
yeah.
So why don't you? From a moral perspective, an ethical perspective, why not?
Because, I mean, personally, if I don't feel it's that big of a deal that I'm eating meat. I mean, I know a lot of people consider like evil, like or bad or like horrible and stuff, but like in my view, it's not that bad.
Well, is it bad to kill an animal when we don't have to?
I say if you just kill an animal and just let it be there, that's just quite bad.
There are other like animals who do the same thing as us.
But other animals also
Don't want to appeal to what animals do to each other as like justification for what we can do. That's a really bad route to take.
other animals also rape one another. Is that then justified because they do that?
Well, other animals rape each other. You can't really
No,
call that.
but rape is not a essential thing to their survival. But them eating is essential to them.
I don't understand. How would you know if another animal raped another animal?
Well,
Which is like, would you know how this cave consent to each other?
Well, unfortunately, there are many examples of that. But the point that you were making was other animals do it.
The animal raped other animal.
Okay, but
I mean, we can argue this, I guess, the finer details of it, but I guess the point is animals can sexually exploit other animals or abuse them in a way that comes from a sexual act. And the point I was making specific to what you said is you said, well, other animals do this. And that's true, but other animals do a whole host of things that we would never consider justified.
I said something that's like essential to their living. Animals like kill. Is it omnivores that eat both?
Yeah.
Omnivores. Okay, so they. Yeah, can eat both. They have the option, but they still occasionally choose to.
But they don't know, do they? They don't know about nutrients, and they
intelligent as us.
correct. Well, or they're different.
They're different. Yeah, like dolphins are quite intelligent. Whales are quite intelligent. But I'm saying in the sense that we are intelligent, they're not as intelligent as us. You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have higher cognitive abilities in many ways than they do, which means that we should be held to a different standard than they are, because we can rationalize things. We do intellectually understand things. And the reason I asked that question about is it bad to kill an animal was because you were saying, I know some people say that eating meat is bad. And the reason why we say that eating meat is bad is because we say that causing suffering and death to an animal is bad. So I guess that's the question. Is causing suffering and death to an animal, when of course we can avoid doing so, is that bad?
Well, technically, like as a direct response, yeah, it's bad.
Yeah.
But there are a lot more factors in play. That's why it's not that easy to convert everybody to being vegan.
But the ease of converting to veganism is a slightly separate topic to whether or not meat in and of itself is bad. So if it's bad to cause suffering and to take the life of an animal, especially in a situation where we don't have to, then that by default means that meat for us is bad because we're causing suffering and death to an animal in a situation where we don't have to.
I don't know. I'm sorry.
Well, I think I was just spitting some truth there, so, and then they zoned out.
Well, I just think that, okay, killing an animal for no reason, that's definitely bad. You know, like, I'm against hunting, but I'm not really against the consumption of meat. Like, I wouldn't be at all.
But it's not...
This just in, as long as you eat your victim, killing them, not really a problem.
It's not a reason that we have to partake in.
Well, why would I not partake in it?
Because you can avoid the thing that you think is bad.
So people can avoid smoking, but they still smoke.
Yeah, I mean,
People can avoid doing weed, but they still do weed.
Yeah, but that's also...
That isn't even equivalent, because if you're smoking, typically, you're only harming yourself. It's not something that you can equate to killing someone, in this case, a non-human animal.
An individualistic thing. If one decides to... No, because we're concerning the rights and autonomy of someone else.
The rights of animals?
Yes.
But
The
then,
autonomy of animals.
okay, but then that opens an entire different chapter, doesn't it?
Why?
Like, wouldn't that open up so many different things? Animals have, like, I understand animals have rights. Like, there are a lot of protected animals around the world, like swans, dolphins and stuff. But I'm just saying, like, whaling was, like, banned recently. But I just think, like, with animals that, like, agricultural animals, like cows, chickens, like, we kill, like, 1 billion chickens a year or something. I mean...
Way more.
Way more.
72 billion.
72 billion. I mean... there is a demand for it. It's gonna exist regardless.
Absolutely, right
I
now.
think the
But
only thing.
is that moral just because there's a demand for it? Is something moral if there's a demand?
If I eat a chicken, I'm not gonna think about my moral standpoint while eating the chicken.
It's not about whether or not you're going to think about it, it's whether or not it is.
Should you?
No, not really.
Why not?
My priorities are more towards my academics than wondering about whether my chicken died a good death or not. Like,
But you can.
You can be invested in multiple priorities at once. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't even need to be a priority to just not do it. I don't wake up and go, it's my priority not to murder today, but I still don't murder.
You can also prioritize your academic studies and not buy chicken.
well, yeah, but like, why would I give that much thought into eating a chicken or not?
You don't have to give that much thought. You just don't order.
You don't even need, you don't need to think. You don't need to care. You just know that it's the wrong thing to do, so you don't do it. That's as simple as that. You don't need to care about the chicken. You don't need to weigh up whether or not they suffered. You don't need to do any of that.
Why would I just like I'm accustomed to eating meat on a weekly basis. Why would I change my behavior just so I can, I don't know, please a new like trend or something? No, I'm not calling it veganism.
It's not about
trend.
pleasing a trend. It's about doing something that reduces suffering to animals.
Okay.
And reduces the infringement of their autonomy.
All right, so you know Delhi, you know India, right? So Delhi's the capital of India.
Correct.
Delhi has one of the highest levels of CO2 in the atmosphere. It has really high pollution levels. It's one of the most polluted cities in the world.
Yeah.
All right. So how would you like on the same level as an analogy, how would you convince drivers to stop driving their cars because of like the really large population of kids with asthma? Which is like way above 50%. It's like 60%.
I mean, I would try and appeal to that side of it. I'd say, look, this has a consequence, and that.
Do you think they would be like, you know what? I'm going to stop using cars. I'm going to like the whole city would stop instead of cycle.
Maybe not, but that's just besides the point. That doesn't mean that you're then justified to buy chicken.
I have the choice then, right? I can like be like, you know what? I won't use my car. I'll carpool, or I'll take the bus.
You have a choice, but choice just because you have a choice doesn't mean that both choices that you can partake in are equally justified. Some choices are more preferable to other choices, and so the choice that reduces animal suffering and harm is preferable to the choice that increases animal suffering and harm.
No, I agree. Animal suffering and farm is really bad. Like, I've met
But you support it. You
by eating food.
Yes, yeah, by eating animals.
Yeah, like, no, indirectly I support it. Yeah, but would I be the person to go kill a chicken? No, I wouldn't be.
But you pay people to do that.
Yeah.
Yes, because there is a demand for it.
But you
We've already been through how, because there's the demand for something doesn't mean that it's justified. We're talking about whether or not something's morally justified, and then it's just saying, oh, there's a demand for it though.
You're creating the demand.
So is the rest of the world. Yeah.
Absolutely. But it's not. That doesn't make it moral. We're starting to go around in circles, but
morally, it's not just arguing the morals here.
Yeah, the morals. Yeah, that's what's being argued here. Yeah.
That's the foundation of this.
Well, morally,
morals can be different for different people, can't they? We don't have like one like basic fun.
That may be the case, but in your moral view, it is bad to kill a chicken. Therefore, paying for them to be killed would be a bad thing. And if you believe that you should avoid bad things, which you seem to, then you ought to be avoiding it.
Fundamental moral. Otherwise, the world would be like a really peaceful fucking place, right?
Sounds nice though.
It sounds amazing, but it's unrealistic.
Unrealistic. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't aspire to make it as peaceful as we can.
Oh, of course.
Okay, relatively, yeah.
So do you think that we should try to make it as peaceful as we can?
But peaceful for someone
I think
could be peaceful for something else.
Like it can't be reached. Like globally, it can't be reached.
So that, in effect, you're saying that nothing should be off the table because peace in its most utopian form can't be achieved. There's no point trying to get it to it as close as we possibly can.
Strive to be peaceful, but like if you're a realist, like there's so many countries that are realist capitalists, like they have their own national interests. Like the realist view is that countries have their own self-interest.
I agree. But what I'm saying is that from an individualist.
Imagine someone using this for any other thing that they themselves deemed wrong. Oh well, I'm burgling this lady, but the world will never be a utopia. The realist countries have their own self-interests. There's a demand for these products that I'm burgling. It just wouldn't sound very good, would it? So it just doesn't sound very good now.
Individualistic perspective, and I would like to think from a societal perspective, the aspiration of reducing harm and suffering and achieving a world that is more peaceful should be what we aspire to try and create as much as is possible. And the problem is when we create this idea that it's all or nothing, where it has to be this utopian mindset of a truly peaceful world, we're creating an unfair aspiration that we then use to justify doing something that we don't have to do, right? Which is what you're doing right now.
By consuming meat.
Yes. Because let's put it in these terms. Let's say there's an animal in front of us right now.
Yeah.
Is it more ethical to kill that animal or not kill that animal?
Depends. If I'm starving to death,
let's say,
then I'm not starving to death.
Give us a more specific example.
Okay, there's a chicken in front of us right now. You'd kill the chicken.
Chickens are technically bred for consumption.
But then, like we said before, dogs who are bred for dogfighting are technically bred for dogfighting.
Yes, they are.
But that doesn't make it moral just because they're bred for that reason.
The people that participate in and actually breed the dogs, for them it's morally acceptable. So like.
But do you think it's morally acceptable?
Who gives a fuck about my opinion?
I can.
Suddenly your opinion doesn't mean anything. Oh no!
Yep, you're one guy.
But do you think that it's morally acceptable?
I don't.
Right. So the purpose of that question is to show that just because they're bred for that reason doesn't in and of itself mean that it's morally justified.
But okay, so let's say if I sit down with a person who like has a massive business, makes money breeding dogs for dog fighting, I'm not going to be able to convince him to switch careers.
No,
it'll be completely
you might
impossible.
not be able to. But
No, you probably wouldn't be able to convince him, but it would be the right thing to do for him to not do it anymore, wouldn't it?
that doesn't mean that what they're doing is okay just because you as an individual can't convince them to change. So look, I get the feeling that I'm not necessarily going to convince you to right now, but what I would love to hope is that we can reflect on this and recognize that we actually have the ability to do something that is, in the wider context of other people doing it, something that can bring about change. And whilst we as individuals aren't going to change the world, and you may feel a little bit disempowered, we as individuals amongst other people who are also making those changes can start to influence things.
How do you think this is going to be achieved in the long run? In the long run,
Well, individual change to begin with, and then legislative change that optimizes things like plant-based food production, that changes how we subsidize agriculture to make it more equitable and economically viable, make plants more available. It's a slow transition over time, but the first piece of that puzzle has to be individuals, because unless we change, governments and legislators and corporations and companies won't change. But you guys can be a part of that. And I think ethically we understand why you should be, because ethically we don't disagree on most of the things that we've spoken about.
Ethically we're on the same wavelength.
Ethically we're on the same page. It's just right now the actions that the three of us choose to partake in are not fully in alignment with one another, and in the case of what you two are discussing, fully in alignment with the ethics that you say you have.
I don't see how what I'm going to do is going to make that big of a change.
In my lifetime, at least.
And just in the world generally. I understand the snowball effect, but that's if like this veganism is a snowball itself. If like the concept itself is a snowball.
How do we change anything if with this attitude? Because if everyone has the same attitude you two have, then nothing changes.
Change, right?
Is there not?
Like, okay, give me another
electric cars, the championing of plant-based food.
I'm looking out.
First of all, electric cars, because a lot of the time, like Teslas are a lot cheaper. They are cheaper than the regular
once
cars.
economic. People only start changing their attitudes once economic is advantageous.
Like I would buy a Tesla car because people are invested into the stock price itself. So if the production of Tesla goes up, if the consumption of Tesla cars and the purchase of it goes up, the stock price will go up as well.
Absolutely. But
so
that's part of change, isn't it? That's part of change. It's not necessarily based off an altruistic version of morals, but what I'm saying is things do change, and that change was inspired by something to begin with, which was that there was a need for change. Of course, like profiteering interests come in. Of course, people will make money from it. Of course, people invest. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But fundamentally, these initial seedlings of change come from the idea that something needs to change.
Well, I think you can preach this to a developed nation. You can't preach it to a developing nation.
But I am preaching it in a developed nation.
Yeah, but you won't but a lot of the world is a developing nation. Like most of the population in the world isn't developing nations.
Absolutely, but disproportionately, the developed nations are the ones that contribute most to this problem. So disproportionately, the choices that we as individuals make have a higher amount of benefit than the choice that someone in a more developing nation would have.
So you were talking about electric cars. I live in Dubai. Why would I buy an electric car? Oil is really cheap. It's cheaper than water.
I mean, I'm not too bothered about debating electric cars with you.
No, but you brought it up. So
I brought it up as a reason to emphasize.
As a reason to emphasize the fact that there's change, yeah.
Is that change is happening?
Yeah,
Because change is happening as a result of
coming from an economic, it's advantageous economically, and that's because governments subsidize it. So
we need to change that.
Well, before government does anything about veganism, I don't think anyone. Well, obviously, people will become vegan for a moral standpoint, and fair enough, fair play to you, and if you props to you, but I don't think until the government invests into this, it's similar to like electric cars. I don't think most people will change their habits.
I agree. But that means that those of us who recognise that ethically we should do, because that's how we get governments to change and listen. If we don't, nothing changes. And that means the problem that we've recognised is unethical continues. And that's the crux, isn't it? Yes, you and I and well, the three of us in general are not going to change the world on our own, but we can be a part of a bigger change, and that bigger change can then influence legislators and those who have the most amount of power to do things that then actually brings about significant change overall.
That's if that bigger change actually takes place.
Of course. Sorry. But if we don't try, it won't.
Well,
all
what
right?
if you try and fail? Like,
But is it better to try and fail than to not try at all?
This mentality is just destructive across the board for like oneself and for a society, just thinking things won't change. Like, where does it come from? You just have to open a history book and see that things have changed. The world looks different to what it did even 50 years ago, even less than that.
in life, I think you should try.
I mean,
So try then. Try.
But you can't use that as an argument for me. You can't use that as like a way to convince me to become vegan.
But that's the argument you just used to try and convince yourself not to become vegan.
why would
My
I?
argument was that, like, okay.
Why would I
We're gonna
waste
go
my
around in
time
circles now.
trying
That's
to?
okay.
Why would I try waste my time? Well, it's not wasting it, but something that could potentially fail because we're uncertain.
Why are you studying? You might
Yeah,
not get
why are you studying? You might fail.
a career.
But
You're studying to increase the chances you will get a career.
no, but what if we're studying just for our own self? We're going to be more knowledgeable.
Probably
my
want a
career
career.
is most likely dependent on how hard I choose to. Like I'm in somewhat control of my own career.
Absolutely.
I'm not in somewhat control of other people's attitude towards veganism.
But you're in
But
control
you're in control of your own.
of your own attitudes, and you're in control of your own choices, your own choices. And nothing will change unless we take control of our own choices. Because if we don't, things will stay the same, and that's not good. All right, guys, let's leave it there.
Yeah, we have
Appreciate your
class
time.
in
I know,
5
yeah,
minutes.
we've been
anyways.
speaking for half an hour, so I appreciate it. But it's lovely meeting you both, and I really appreciate it. And I agree. Look, it's easy to feel disempowered. Of course it is, but
See, I
But
like,
nothing changes.
I like your standpoint and I like your arguments, but I'm just saying from an economic perspective, I don't really see how this makes sense.
well,
Until
animal
there is a
farming
greater
isn't
investment.
economical, right? You know, animal farming isn't economical. We use
Well, it is.
billions of subsidies from the taxpayer just to make it even financially
But
viable.
wouldn't you use the same thing for plants?
Well, actually, we already have a plant-based food system that requires much less on subsidies because it's more financially viable as it currently is.
So I'm Indian, so I know about the stats in India. So India's workforce is 500 million strong.
But you can still have an agricultural sector. We're
And
not
most
destroying it.
majority of the sector is in plant-based. They produce crops, but these guys are still heavily subsidized by government. So I don't understand how your argument about like animals being heavily subsidized.
What I'm saying
Yeah, they're heavily subsidized, perhaps, but these plants go to animals, so it's part of animal agriculture as well. So you're taking out a large chunk of the problem.
That makes sense.
Well, the majority of subsidies go to animal farming. I'm not saying that subsidies don't go to plant-based food production, they do. But when you look at the numbers globally, statistically, it's much higher going to animal farming. And that's because it costs a lot more to farm
And
animals.
they produce economic returns as well.
Well, not really.
What do you mean? There is still consumption of animals on there.
But who are these economic returns for?
Corporations, country, GDP allows them to invest back into the country.
Well, not necessarily, because that investment back into the country stems from things like a proper taxation system, of course, but also infrastructure. But that infrastructure is more and more increasingly abroad now, isn't it? When you look at what's happening with Cargill, a lot of that infrastructure is placed in South America and in the Amazon and places. So it's not necessarily a trickle-down situation in that sense.
Okay, let's say you achieve your goal, right? And you convert like a really large proportion of a country into being vegan. What do you suggest we do with all the animals?
Well, I mean, look, the change is going to be gradual, all right? So it's not going to be that we go vegan overnight. You know, it's going to be a long process. And the only reason we have so many animals now is because we breed them into existence. So as the number of people going vegan increases, that should somewhat proportionally mean the number of animals we breed into existence decreases. So we're never going to have all these animals to release. By the time we get to that point, it will be a very small number of animals left, if any at all, because we just simply won't breed them anymore.
So you suggest that cows go extinct?
Well, I suggest not wild cattle, but the unnatural, selectively bred animals that we breed into existence. Yeah, but we still have wild animals that we're not impacting wild cattle or wild turkeys or wild chickens. Just the animals that we breed into existence. All right, guys. Anyway, nice to see you.
About 5 minutes.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Have a great life, my friends.
You too.
Good luck with your YouTube.
Yeah, good luck with changing people, one by one.
That was Earthling Ed, everybody. Do you think that these two convinced Earthling Ed what he was doing is pointless? It's kind of weird to be trying to convince people that convincing people is a waste of time, because why would you bother trying to convince someone that then something is a waste of time, because you're then trying to convince them. But lots of good points there by Earthling Ed, and it seems that a lot of the time people will distract from their own consumption, from their own participation, when they perhaps feel a little bit guilty about it or they can't justify it. And it seems like that was what was done here, because to even say, you know, what's the point of even trying because it might fail, when you're constantly trying things, you're literally at a university that you might fail the course of. It just makes it sound like you don't really have a good argument, a good justification for what you're doing. But thank you ever so much for watching. Let us know what you thought of this down below. And don't forget to go vegan for the animals, because they are who it means everything to.